after Katie started working for Joe McKenna,
Yeah.
who was Joe McKenna to you? For those people who don't know, I mean, he's an iconic stylist, but how long were you working for him and what was that experience like?
I worked for Joe for 6 years. First of all, Joe was like my favorite stylist. Um, Before I even understood what being a stylist was, I remember the very first fashion images I fell in love with were Bruce Weber pictures. Um, and Joe worked on all of those. And I grew up obsessed with like Abercrombie and that lifestyle and those catalogs, and he worked on those. So before I even knew who he was, I was inspired by his work. And then I worked at Love. He contributes to Love. He was very much still the king of like fashion, styling, and he was like every stylist's favorite stylist. And I always set my sights very high. And so when I decided that I wanted to assist a stylist full time after working at Love, I didn't have a list. I was just like, I'm going to work for Joe. And I did end up there somehow.
Did anybody at Love make that intro or you just made that happen on your own?
No, I got his email address from someone and I emailed him, no joke, like probably 20 times. And I emailed his assistant at the time, like so many times, and never got a response.
Never.
And then never once. And then I heard that his assistant had left. So I said, well, what do I have to lose? Let me give it one more go. And I emailed him, I remember, on my birthday. And in true Joe fashion, he emailed back within 2 minutes. Like as my email box was still open, and I saw a response, and I thought, oh, maybe he blocked me. Like maybe this is like a bounce back. And he said, are you in London? Like, can you meet this week? Tomorrow, in fact. And we did. And he was everything I thought he would be, kind of cold and incredibly professional and very thorough and direct in his line of questioning. And we started working together pretty quickly. And I was immediately struck by how aware he was of everything. You know, there was no detail about a room that he entered that he wasn't aware of, including his presence and his effect on the energy of a room, you know, and I was very inspired by that, actually. I was very deeply tapped into the human condition, and I think that really went into the pictures. I always was remarked by how hard Joe pushed everyone and everything. I mean, the arguments that he would have and the shouting matches, and it was all for like in his mind, the greater good of whatever project he was working on. And it didn't matter if he was working on a collection with a designer, or he was working on a picture with a photographer, or he was working on a layout with an art director. His vision and the way that he saw it was so important to him. And, you know, the way that he communicated and expressed that was the way he communicated and expressed that.
Which was what?
Joe was tough. Joe's tough. And I think his reputation precedes him. I don't think
mean?
He could be very mean. Yeah. I mean, I think especially for someone who worked as closely with him as I did, you know, I was with him every day, all day. I was his only assistant for 6 years. I worked on all of the market for all of his shoots, all of the prep, all of the production, you know.
Did you build a friendship? It's hard to work with somebody every day and not build a friendship.
Oh, I loved Joe. Yeah. I mean, I think I really understood him. And by the way, I'm very drawn to difficult characters. I'm drawn to complicated personalities. Like anyone who's like, quote unquote, nice is probably like not going to be my favorite person. Like I like people who are deeply layered. And I think Joe, as much as he is difficult and sort of can be, his personality can be jarring. He's also deeply sensitive and very caring. And like I said, he really took his responsibility as a mentor very seriously. Like, he would shout at me for, not setting up a room properly, but then would very clearly describe to me the way that is the right way to do it. And even, as we got deeper into the relationship, it was very clear we had a very special affection for each other. I mean, he was very careful to make sure that I was staying in nice places. I was traveling well. I remember one time we were in the Hamptons at Bruce Weber's house, and we had dinner at Bruce's, and it's fucking Bruce Weber's house. You can imagine the people who
We're there.
are there.
Yeah.
And I'm very shy, just naturally as a person. And so I said to him, Joe, okay, I'm gonna go to bed now. And he said, well, say good night. So I said, good night, everyone. And no one sort of looked up, and he looked at me in a very sort of, paternal way, which he was a father figure to me. And he said, speak up, make your presence known. And so, I did. I stood up a bit straighter and I said, good night, everyone. And everyone looked up and said, oh, good night, Carlos. And I don't know, there was just a sense of pride that I derived from that moment. And I'll never forget that. For some reason, I will never forget that exchange of energy that happened right there, where he was really like, take up space. You know what I mean? Like, you deserve to be here too, was what I understood that exchange to mean. And I think there were various points throughout our relationship where he was saying that to me directly and indirectly. And, he prepared me for where I'm at now. Like, I wouldn't be here if not for Joe.
How did your relationship with Joe McKenna end?
So, when I left Joe, when I stopped working for him, it sort of came to a natural end. I think at the end of 5 years, we both were aware that it probably wasn't going to last for much longer for various reasons. A lot of my friends that I had grown up with had really started to go off on their own, and like their careers had taken off, and it was ending. So I went to him and I said, Joe, I'm giving you a year and I'm going to leave. And it went well. I found my replacement. Everything was great. I left. I found an agent. I started on my own. We remained in touch. Every time we see each other, it was all love. He gave great advice. It was all good. When I started to become quite successful, I did notice a sort of shift in the energy. And I think when it became clear that I was going to be a sort of force, and that maybe we had some crossovers in terms of clients and representation, agencies and things like that, there was a shift in the energy. And there was a conversation that happened, and he made it pretty clear that he was unhappy with some of the boundaries that he felt that I had crossed.
Do you think that Joe McKenna saw you as a threat as your career grew?
I think that fashion is a really interesting place where no matter how successful you are, no matter how legendary you are, no matter how much of an impact you've had, you always feel insecure, or you can always feel insecure that someone else can come and take your spot. And I do think that a lot of people who have been doing this a long time do feel that young people are coming and taking up space. It is a young man's sport, after all. And I think people love the new and the bright and the shiny young thing. And we see it happen all the time. We see it happen with I was just watching The Last Showgirl, and I thought that its similarity to some of the phenomenons that happen in fashion was striking, because you can sometimes feel like, oh, who's this young person who's coming in and like gonna take my spot? So yeah, I do feel to a certain extent there was some unhappiness with the potential of being replaced.
Why do you say people in fashion don't retire? What's that about? Why not? There's so many boomers, no shade, who, won't let go of the throne. And for an industry that is about freshness and newness and ideas and innovation, I find that to be ironic that there are a lot of people who do not welcome that.
I mean, it's addictive. Making things are addictive, is addictive. And the thrill of making something out of nothing and the excitement that comes from working on a fashion show, making a fashion image, the charge of creativity, being surrounded by people who are the best and the brightest and the most energetic and the most fun. Like, fashion's hard, but it's really fucking fun. And I think that when you're in it, you can really derive a lot of your identity from it. Like, I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I went to a therapeutic retreat. I call it Sad Camp. And one of the best things about it is that for your entire time there, you're not allowed to say your last name, and you're never allowed to tell anyone what you do for a living. Like, you can't talk about your profession at all. And for the first week I was there, I really struggled to understand how to describe who I was without saying, I'm Carlos and I'm a stylist, or I work in fashion, or I make things for a living, or I work at this magazine or with this famous person or whatever. And it suddenly occurred to me, like, wait a minute. If I do this for another 10, 20, 30, 50 years, will that be all that I am? And I think when you've been doing it for so long, it becomes really difficult to extract yourself from your job, because fashion's not just a job. It does become your life. It's the way that you socialize. It's the way that you view the world. It's the way that you think about things. It's the community that you surround yourself with. I mean, fashion,
friend groups and dinners and lifestyle,
all of it,
and planes, and
it's a lifestyle. And I imagine that, like, if you're doing that from the age of 20 something to 60 something, like, what comes next?